Well, welcome. This is the 84th episode of Women on Wealth, and the title today is Framed for the newly released book, which is Framed Women in the Family Court Underworld. And I have the two authors on with us today, Dr. Christine Cocchiola and Amy Polacko. Hi, ladies.
Hi, Julina. It's great to be back.
It's great. I know you both have been on here before, and we'll talk about that again at the end. But I love that the two of you came together and collaborated because both of the topics when you were on are obviously so similar and around this. If I can quickly go through your bios first, and then we'll get going. Christine, I'm going to start with you. Christine has been a social justice advocate since the age of 19 as a domestic abuse, sexual assault crisis counselor, and a child welfare advocate. She served as a board member on the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and has actively supported codifying coercive control as the foundation of domestic abuse. She's written policy briefs supporting these efforts and providing expert testimony at legislative hearings. And I know you did that specifically in Connecticut. And then Amy is an award-winning journalist, investigative reporter, and divorce coach who survived a narcissistic nightmare. And I know you talked about that on your last episode. After her own experience, she formed Freedom Warrior Coaching to become the guide she wished she had. She's earned a master's degree from Columbia University School of Journalism, was part of the Pulitzer Prize winning team covering the TW8 Flight 800 crash for Newsday. I remember that. I remember that occurrence. She's coached hundreds of women going through divorce, runs a support group, and writes for national news outlets about coercive control, domestic abuse, divorce, online dating, and singlehood. Her work has been featured in HuffPost, Miss Magazine, Washington Post, Newsweek, NBC, Independent, and Observer. And now I need to take a breath. And there's more in both of your bios, but hopefully that's enough to get the listeners an understanding of the two powerhouse ladies that we have on today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start with the impetus of the book, if we can. I don't know which one of you wants to start there.
Sure, sure. So I think, throughout our careers, and, certainly I've been doing this since I was 19, there's this constant nagging, like, why aren't these stories out there? Why are not more people talking about this? When I tell people what I do for a living and I try to share it, we were just talking about this before the podcast, like people kind of get a little bit, well, is it really that bad? Like, are you sure? And even, some of our advanced copy readers are kind of like a little bit like, really? It's this bad? And so this idea that there's so many stories that need to be told, and is there a way to tell them? And that really was the impetus of the book. Yeah, is there a way to tell them? So,
Yeah. And I
mhm.
love it too because every time I talk about an upcoming podcast or one that I've just recorded, I get all excited and I share with individuals. I just talked about it we did one on financial abuse recently. The response is always the same from a handful of individuals. It's always, is that still going on? That's what I always hear. And so that's why I'm so excited that you're sharing these stories. And how did the two of you meet to come together on this?
We met at a Jennifer's Law training that I was doing, actually, gosh, quite a few years ago. Yeah, and then Amy asked if she could quote me in an article, and I think that's where it started. So, yeah,
Yeah,
we've
I
been
love, and
collaborating for a
so
while.
those listening are from Connecticut are probably familiar with Jennifer's Law, but there's also some that aren't from the state. If you can quickly go through that.
Sure, sure. Jennifer's Law, actually, I was one of the first testifiers for it, but Alex Kazar, actually the first testifier, Alex Kazar, proposed it. It's a law that actually codifies coercive control as a form of domestic abuse. And I was so grateful that they asked for my input on this piece of legislation. And now we have this legislation in 7 states.
Amazing.
I think I like to always say this other part, 43 states in the United States do not recognize domestic violence unless there actually is violence, which is problematic when
Yes.
all violence is based on coercion and control. Yeah.
Amazing. And Jennifer's Law was based, if I recall, off of it was actually three women named Jennifer. Is that correct?
Two women,
Or
yes.
two, I'm sorry. Yep.
Jennifer
Okay.
Mignano out of
Yeah.
Terryville, whose children witnessed her murder.
Yeah.
She had fled the state to go to a shelter out of state, and she was by the Connecticut police made to come back because her ex was accusing her of kidnapping when she actually was trying to find safety. And when she came back, he sabotaged her and killed her in front of the children. And then Jennifer Dulos, of course, a pretty infamous case here in the state of Connecticut. So we
Yeah.
call it Jennifer's with an apostrophe after the S.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and I thank you for doing that. So, who is the book written for?
Well, I think it's written for three purposes, really, Julina. First of all, we want to validate for all the women going through these type of family court nightmares that you are not alone. You are not crazy, despite what some may say, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little later. So we want them to take some comfort in these stories and see themselves. We also want to educate and warn women, those who are dating, those who are picking a mate. I think of your amazing book, Money Confident Girls. You are out there educating women about money and young women. And we want to educate young women about manipulators, abusers, coercive controllers, how this shows up. We have 22 contributors in this book from the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And I think the most fascinating part of the stories, of course, we get into the family court part of it, but we ask them, how did you meet him?
Hmm.
And we see that dating and that love bombing unfold. So we hope it's really educational. And then last but not least, we really want to enact change. We want to light a fire under everyone, allies like you and women out there, whether you're happily married or you're single or you're a man who cares about women's rights. We have a call to action section in the back of the book that kind of tells you what you can do now that we've ticked you off.
Yeah.
This is what we need you to do.
I love it. And so when you say light a fire, the book isn't necessarily just written for women that feel they may be in some type of situation. It's for anyone that wants to make an awareness of it.
Absolutely. We all know someone. I mean, this is the bottom line. People like put up these blinders and they think, oh, it doesn't happen to me or it's not happened in my family system. And then when you start to really talk about it, everybody knows someone. We have a wonderful epilogue from Tina Swithin. She is One Mom's Battle, and she took her own experiences and created amazing advocacy around the world. And she says this book should be a prerequisite for all women. It should be read before marriage, but definitely before divorce or child custody proceedings. And we say, even beyond that, this book should be read by anyone who cares about women.
Yeah.
Anyone who cares about
Oh, I
women.
love that. Yeah, absolutely. And can you talk a little bit about some of the other stories that are in there and hopefully give some incentive to read further?
We're
Well,
happy to read a little bit if you'd like at some
Yeah,
point. Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, we have stories that, like Amy said, some of them, are like the first one, fairy tale gone wrong. It's like just this story about a woman who really thought that it was going to be this amazing relationship, as most victims survivors do, right?
Sure.
And then, honestly, it feels like the stories, if there's a possibility that things can get worse, some of them really, we have a mom who lost custody. We have many moms who lost custody, I should say, but we have one where the law firm that she lost custody by because of the abuser actually posted a big yellow certificate on their website. I lost custody of my children with her name. And there's a YouTube video that actually proves this. I mean, these lawyers and the ways that they play with people's hearts and the welfare of children is just astonishing. We have one mom who hasn't seen her children in 6.5 years. Another mom who her children were taken away for 800 days so far because she complained about one of the court professionals, and she was retaliated against. Amy, I'll let you, I mean, as you know, we can kind of be very verbose about this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I could read from one of the stories, Julina. I
Yeah,
know.
I would love to. Please.
Okay. So all the women's names in the book have been changed. They're pseudonyms to protect them,
Okay.
obviously. This one is called Spiritual Abuse, and it's Lucy from the United States. I picked this one for this podcast because I thought that, this is something you talk about a lot when a woman decides to stay home, perhaps,
Yeah.
and take one for the team, and it's a family decision. that decision can have ramifications. And
Yeah.
if you've married someone who ends up being a coercive controller, which they have been from the beginning, of course, you
Yeah.
know, we show these disastrous consequences. So this is a little of the beginning of her story. He and I met the summer before my freshman year of college in my rural hometown out west. He was a young hedge fund manager who left New York to run his business and get some fresh air, so he said. I would later learn that he burned bridges quickly, trying to be the biggest fish, so he sought out a smaller pond. He had mastered the self-made man narrative and was the closest thing to God I'd ever come across. I was young and lacking direction when he fixated on me. No one had ever told me I had the potential to be special or that I was capable of living an incredible, grand life. But he opened these exciting doorways of possibility for me that had never crossed my mind and promised to guide me there if I followed his direction. I wanted that fantasy life with him and became willing to do anything to get it. So we began a vicious 18-year cycle of hope, failure, and devastation, fueled by my determination to be good enough and someday not disappoint him.
Mm.
And as her story goes on, they move all over the country. She has multiple children. Finally she's had enough. It is an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
and I don't want to give the whole story away, of course, but he manufactures an incident and she doesn't see her children for months and months. She's
Wow.
able to over time have supervised visits and get back to seeing them. One of them she still really doesn't have contact with.
Yeah.
And so I think, this is a cautionary tale for
Mhm.
all women. The last thing I want to say is, like we said, these are a diverse group of women. So, not everyone married a hedge fund manager. We have people from
Right.
all walks of life, but it that type of lifestyle can be enticing, as we
Okay.
know.
Yeah. So it's not just when you say a diverse group of women, it's not just diverse across multiple countries, but it's across,
Socioeconomic,
yeah,
yes, absolutely.
amazing. And 18 years to go through that. That's horrible. Um, okay. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds also like when I first heard about the book, I'm wondering if others are thinking this too. You think about the stories that you have in there that are just, the devastating experience that they go through emotionally, financially, family support, things like that. But you've alluded multiple times now to the court system, attorneys, and sort of handling the system. It sounds like there's a lot of that in there as well, which I think is important because, are these courts and are these attorneys going to be supportive to you or not? And it sounds like in these cases they just haven't been.
Our ideal, we want every lawyer to read this book.
Oh,
Every
wow.
family court lawyer. I mean, what we know now, or what we've always known, is that family court lawyers have judicial immunity, and they've had it since 1607. So there's that. And then we also know that if you're in law school, you don't have to take a course in domestic abuse. And frankly, even if they do, it's probably a domestic violence course, looking through the violent incident model. It's archaic. And the same goes for judges. I actually was just on a call with someone who runs a major organization, and she said that she's been doing the same training for a couple of years, and in all her years doing this training, she's only had one family court judge show up to the training. And
Wow.
she actually felt like he was disengaged. I mean, they see these cases as high conflict. They see there's two people, they can't get along, just get this divorce over with. When we
Mhm.
know that like upwards of 90% of custody disputes are domestic abuse. That's
Wow.
what they are.
Yeah.
And so the court is not looking through the correct lens. And then these people, like this story Amy just shared, they show up as charlatans, I mean, they often like are performative. They make a lot of money. We have someone pretty well known in the state of Connecticut who supported Jennifer's Law, and her ex actually like was a hedge fund kind of manager. And the judge was actually asking for advice on investments in the courtroom. Like, like like in the middle of this
I can't believe I'm
situation where
laughing. I'm
this,
sorry. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
it's absolutely ludicrous, and it's a game to them.
Yeah.
And my own experience when our judgment was supposed to come down, the judge said, I need a decision by 4:30. 4:30, we're waiting out there. I'm standing next to my abuser because no one's protecting me. I mean, my sister-in-law was there with me, thank God, but he's there. And the judge went to go play golf, left. So I
Oh,
have to come back and pay a whole nother day of attorney's fees
yeah.
to get my case settled. And so, and that's the other thing. I think as victims and survivors, I know Amy hears these stories all the time. It's
Mhm.
like because you've been so controlled for so long, when there's an injustice in the court system, like you're not getting your child support or you're not getting the car you wanted, sometimes you'll hold on to that really tight.
Right.
And that does create more conflict. And we understand why victims do that. But the problem is sometimes you got to let go of the rope.
Yeah.
You just got to let go. And that's, I mean, talk about trauma.
I can't even imagine how hard that is to do. And so it sounds like, and I don't know if you know the specific answer to my comment here, but it sounds like judges that are appointed to family courts don't necessarily have the appropriate training or experience for these situations.
They don't want the job. Getting a job in family court is not something that people line up for. And
Okay.
correct. They
That's
haven't
that's
had to
not the
take a
high end of
domestic.
a judge's.
Yeah, and it depends on the state. I
Yeah.
mean, Caden's law is now implementing that judges have to be trained, which is great. And, so we have Caden's law in several states in the United States. But
Okay.
the question always is there funding and is it the right training? Who's going
Yeah.
to be doing the training? And are
Absolutely.
judges
And
going
is
to be
that a new
engaged?
law or is that more
It
recent?
is. It's the one that was through VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, with Caden's Law. So now we have the reauthorization of VAWA in
Okay.
2022 by Biden. But I don't know if you remember, Angelina Jolie was there with Ruth Glenn, who's the head of NCADV, and they proposed including that children are protected, that we make decisions based on the well-being of children before we determine custody.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And if someone wanted to learn more about what laws are in effect for their state, is there somewhere that you recommend to go, or just in general? You have it in the
Oh,
book?
here, it's in the.
Right now, yes, we do. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And can
And
I
across the world, we've covered like across the world laws that specifically
Yeah.
impact women and children.
Okay.
We
Oh,
didn't cover them all, but we tried our best.
yeah, absolutely. And
can I just add something to that, Julie?
yeah,
I think absolutely, obviously, judges need to be educated and need better training, but there's also an accountability factor that's not happening. I mean, family court is very secretive. It's behind closed doors. There's no accountability. Yes, there are these grievance committees in most states, but does anything ever happen? It's kind of like this old boys club. And I think what's one of the most disheartening things that we both see is that you have women who are actually turning on women to be part of the club. And
okay.
so, I had a client whose attorney said the quiet part out loud and said, I'm not going to die on a hill for you. In other
Wow.
words, I'm not going to give up my career when I'm going to be here tomorrow morning with another case, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to bat for you, really. And one last thing about Jennifer's Law, because I wrote an article for Ms. Magazine about is Jennifer's Law being used in Connecticut? And the sad reality is that a lot of attorneys don't want to bring it up. They say, oh, the judges don't like it. They don't understand it.
Oh my gosh.
Some women in Connecticut have taken it upon themselves to bring it up, verbalize this in a courtroom, make sure it's on the record
Yeah.
because no one else will do it.
That's
And
amazing. So just because a law is in place doesn't mean that it's actually being as successful as you would hope it would be.
Imagine, right? Like imagine that, you want to go to work every day, you want to make money, you want judges to like you want to win cases.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you come in and you're like, she's a Jennifer's Law victim, she's a Jennifer, like you're not going to be given the same status. There's a stigma with
Sure.
being a supporter of domestic abuse victims. There's just a stigma. Yeah,
Um,
it's heart-wrenching. It's about, for me, it always comes back to, I'm one of 10 people who signed Amber Heard's amicus brief
okay.
and for her appeal. And it's like going back to the psychologist who testified against her. That psychologist met with Johnny Depp at his home before she was hired, had cocktails with him and his lawyers, and then now gets hired to investigate her pathology. Like she's got an issue, not him, right? Very interesting, right? No, it's not. It's about integrity. Where's the integrity? There's none.
Holy cow.
So these lawyers are doing things just to either win a case or to get the case over with, to
Yeah.
make income. And I know there's good lawyers, Amy, and I know there's good lawyers, but honestly, it's like picking through like the sand on the beach.
Yeah. Yep.
Needle in a haystack, yeah.
Well, and I think that you're also sharing why it's so important that if you know someone or you're going through this, you need that support, right? Whether it's a support group like Amy, like you have, or just you have to build your own group.
Yeah, yeah. I have
I
a
don't know how you
protective
do it.
parenting support group online, but I only let in people I've met. I
Okay.
literally have to meet them face to face because, like, it's just this is the world they live in. As Amy said, people don't want to tag us on
Yeah,
like the book and things like that, because they're
absolutely.
afraid.
And let me circle back one more time to the question about the states. And maybe I don't know if this is an opinion or what or if it's more of a fact when you list them all out, but are there certain states that you deem as leaders of the charge on this effort and the ones that are really far behind failing? Or how do you view that when you look on a state by state basis?
Mhm.
They're all bad.
Yeah, everywhere. I don't know, Amy, do you get emails all the time? Oh, Ohio's so bad, or oh, California's terrible, or Australia's terrible to vict. Like it's everywhere.
Okay.
It's everywhere. There's a pocket of good lawyers and good court professionals who are doing this GAL work, forensic evaluating, etc. There's a pocket, but overall, 50-50 is going to be determined,
Yeah.
and no matter what the abuser did. No matter what. I have a woman who was thrown down the stairs in front of her child. Her child prevented her from going all the way down the stairs. And he is getting 50-50 because it happened a year ago and he's been in therapy.
So how do you find the right ones? How does one find the right attorney and can you pick that appropriate you have to be assigned to a judge, right? You can't pick a judge. So what do you do?
I
I
think as far as attorneys, because look, I have a lot of women who are thinking about divorce. They know they want to escape and they don't know how.
yes.
I always say, you can't take a review online, and it kills me sometimes when people post on Facebook in a mom's group, like, something you can tell something egregious has happened in their marriage. And they're like, I need an attorney stat, I need a bulldog, and all these people start
Yes.
putting names in. And these people, you have no idea how they know that person. You don't even know if they work at that office. I hired the wrong attorney once because somebody said he was a great guy. And it turned out they were buddies with him through
Yeah.
someone else. And like that was a mistake on my part, but that's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I always say to clients, like, we need someone who has a case similar to yours, right? A protective mom, someone who's suffering from abuse, who has had a good experience with that attorney. And like Christine, if I haven't met this attorney in person, I will have a Zoom with them. I will, network with them. I will try to do my own little investigation
Yes.
of what I can find out. And I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah.
One thing I'd love to talk about, Julina, is the devastating financial impact of all of this, right? And
Yes,
I know this
please.
is something you're passionate about, is that women, like we're talking about, who want to leave, often they've been cut off from the finances. They don't know where the
They have
money,
no idea.
they have no idea. They can't get, I had a client crying on a Zoom with me this week, like, where do I get the money from? If I can't, it's so hard. And I remember asking an attorney once, well, what do these women do who don't have the money? Well, dad opens up his checkbook. Their parents usually empty their retirement account and
Yeah.
whatever that is. And I think it's so important that we teach women that you must have your own money. You must have an escape fund, even if you are blissfully happy. I mean, of course, this could be a whole nother podcast. I think women should all have a prenup. I think you should have a postnup if you stay home with the children. So you get a salary that goes into an account. But
Yeah.
if that hasn't happened, you have
Yeah.
to start siphoning away money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important in terms of building your team. It's you need to have a really good attorney that talks about those prenups, postnups, financial advisor. Just you need to know where the money is. And I think it's hard because as a society, whether there's one individual in the family working or two, it doesn't matter. I find there's always one person responsible for the finances and the investments. And maybe
Right.
someone else is responsible for paying the bills. And I get it, but at the same time, you have to know where all that money is. whether you trust them or not, right? Even if, God forbid you lose the spouse and you are in a fantastic marriage. I see that all the time too. It's you have to know where everything is at all times.
And I would say that, I mean, I know cases all the time, and mine included. I mean, again, I was doing this work since the age of 19, didn't know I was a victim, right?
Yeah.
And so I was in charge of all the finances. I took care of everything, but I also was the one who was supplementing income when he wasn't depositing his fair share. When
Mm,
I wanted to go on the family vacation, I was working the extra hours to make sure we could have the things that I wanted for our family. And anytime I said, can we talk about a budget here? Like, can we each contribute equal amounts or something like that? It became a fight, right? So then what
right.
do you learn? Victims learn to not even bring it up anymore, to
Yeah.
just not talk about it, because at least then there's a little more peace in the house. And you
Yes.
and I have had this discussion, Julina. 99% of victims of coercive control suffer financial abuse of some form. So it
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be just you're on a budget, right? It can be, you know what, you're the workhorse. And I have a lot of moms that happens to them. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden they lose everything, as Amy says, like just everything's gone then, that any access is over. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And
Just this, I had a client who is pursuing divorce, but her husband doesn't know yet. And coming to that realization, she works, same thing, her paycheck goes in, is used for the family. And she's realized, which was no surprise to me, that his paycheck from his business, only a portion of it is going into the family. He doles it out. It's all about power and control, as Dr. C talks about so much, you know.
yeah.
So she was like, why is he doing that? Oh, I'll tell you why he's doing that, right? Because he wants you dependent on him. He's
Yes.
got her right where he wants her, you know?
And
Yeah.
also participating oftentimes in shenanigans with the other money,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
that's, you find out they have this ulterior life, and, this is, yeah. And so I think, to Amy's point, if you're feeling like something doesn't feel right, it
Hmm.
probably isn't right. I mean,
Yes.
we've learned as women, we were brought up as women to not say we didn't want to hug Uncle John, or, to just acquiesce to the adults in our life. We're supposed to be accommodating. Women in general are
Yeah.
groomed that way from traditional values and from the world that we live in, society structures. And so when our intuition tells us something, oftentimes we're suppressing it.
Yes.
And that's problematic.
It's extremely problematic. And I know we've talked about this individually in the past, but I feel like I should mention it. Certainly, most of these cases, the woman is the victim. However, there are situations where it is flipped. Like I grew up with someone I learned very recently, he divorced his wife because she was funneling money away from them. And so that happens too.
Right. Yeah, and we call it family, women in the family court underworld, because what we know from research is it happens at such a greater
At
level
such a
to
great,
women.
yes.
And it
Yes.
doesn't mean men don't experience it, but women do not have the same power in society that men do. They just don't. You take a woman judge, and we, again, and as Amy said, there's a lot of judges and lawyers that we have worked with that are doing just as much, like, horrific atrocities to women
Yep.
in general because of the patriarchy. And so our messaging is, listen, we want to eradicate this for the most vulnerable. Let's just
Yeah.
look at the most vulnerable, women and children. And
Mhm.
once we do that, oh my gosh, we can begin expanding this to the idea that gay men suffer this at such a high rate
Yeah.
from other men. We
Yes.
can begin discussing how men can suffer this too. But
Hmm.
women do not have the same ability to oppress in the same way. It's
Yeah.
just a fact of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's still this stigma, this bias in the system that unfortunately amplifies this issue, which I laugh because I had to go to court for jury duty. And at least here in Connecticut, if you've gone recently and you go and you have to watch that video for an hour, I think it was, about how not to be biased and and you kind of laugh when you go through it, but it's unfortunate that it's still in the court system. Whether you're a juror, whether you're a judge, or it's still there. So
It absolutely is there. And it's something I wrote about for Ms. Magazine. I think the title of the article was Hysterical Women Out for Revenge, right? And I used a scene from Fatal Attraction because that's what we see in family court a lot, that the
wow.
woman is typified from the get-go as, she's been scorned, she's been wronged, she's out to take him down no matter what. It's all about revenge. She's making things up. I mean,
Yeah.
that's this whole parental alienation syndrome that we talk about in so many of these stories, that the woman is accused of turning the kids against, the dad. And so, that's what she's up against. We see this
Totally.
over and over again. It's not just one case. It's not an anomaly.
Right, right. And so when I kicked this off, I mentioned that Framed was newly launched, but you're still in the pre-launch, correct? You're almost there. Can you clarify?
Um,
We're in pre-order until
You,
October 1st,
okay, so it's October 1st is the
which
date.
is
October 1st, 2024.
yeah, excuse me, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and then
Yes.
November is Family Court Awareness
Okay,
Month now
that's
that
right.
is now sweeping the country. So yeah, so we're super
I
excited.
love the timing of it. You're right around the corner. I think I misspoke in the beginning because you two have done such a fantastic job, as I said when we first jumped on the Zoom of your pre-launch and your social media. I'm super jealous.
No, let's just say, Julina, that, and yes, I realize that I put my purple on a little early, but this is domestic violence awareness
Oh,
color. Is that we know, and we say in the book, this is going to take a grassroots movement. And that's why we've been so passionate about getting the word out. We have people in our Framed book launch team on Facebook. Any person who can spread the word, whether they can do it
yes,
publicly on social media about this book to get these women's stories out there,
yes,
or if they're more comfortable privately. We know they have got a text thread with their girlfriends. We know they have college friends and high school friends and family members and people they might think are going through something like this. So
yes,
even if it's a private sharing, we appreciate that too.
yes. So you have a Facebook page that people can go to if they want to join, and that's called Framed, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Framed book launch team, and then it's
Okay.
Dr. C and Amy. And we also have a website for the book, which is narcfreepress.com. You can sign up on our mailing list to get updates there.
Do you have your hat, Amy? I gave my hat to my
Oh
dad,
my
but we have framed hats
God.
and t-shirts too.
Yes,
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
And then also you can pre-order on Amazon, correct?
You can pre-order anywhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Um,
Bookshelf.
yep. So the other thing people can do is they can go on Goodreads and leave a review, and they can also click to say that they want to read this book, which is very helpful to us. It's free to create a Goodreads account.
Yes.
You can do an anonymous review, but if you just want to click to read, that's perfect too. And we should mention that we are so grateful. Dr. Ramani, narcissistic abuse expert in the world, wrote our foreword and wrote about
Oh,
the industrial divorce complex. And we also have Dr. Lisa Fontes, who's an expert witness now certified, I believe, in 18 states. I actually work with her collaboratively to create more expert witnesses because so many victim survivors need good people in the courtroom advocating for them. And she wrote, as an expert witness, I can attest that Cocchiola and Polacko's groundbreaking book sheds light where it is sorely needed. So we are just beyond grateful for those people who have supported this book and for you supporting this book. So
yeah, and we should say that, we're also grateful to the 22 contributors, right? Because they're so brave. You know,
yes.
it took a lot for them to do this. And I think just like us, they may be out of family court or still in the situation and they cannot look away. They did it to help other women. They did
Yes.
it to educate other women. They did it to help move this movement forward. And we wouldn't have the book without them, obviously.
Yeah. Well, we have to thank the two of you for continuing to shed light on this. I'm so proud of you two. I love this. It's been so fun to watch the journey with you two for the last few years, and I can't wait. So I'm
thank
going to
you.
pre-order. Uh,
Thank you for being an ally. We appreciate it.
no, anytime. And so the last thing I'll mention is both of you were on the podcast, and I think Christine, we were laughing. You might have been one of my first interviews, but if listeners are interested in going back, Christine, I interviewed you on June 7th of 2021. That was titled "Financial Abuse: A Form of Coercive Control." And then Amy, you and I spoke, and the podcast went out February of 2023 on safeguarding your financial independence. So, so if any of the listeners want to go back and learn more about the two of you, your story, and again, this journey that you have this dogma about it, and I love it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm just remembering our first conversation just because I think you found me on LinkedIn and you thought maybe I could talk like about like a woman's experiences in general about wealth and things like that. And then you called me and I'm like, well, actually, I have no money and I've been abused and I can talk about financial abuse if you want. And you were like, okay, let's do
Yeah.
it. So
And
it wasn't the intent of what our call was supposed to be. And then all of a sudden it was like yeah.
no, and that was when I kicked off the podcast and off the suggestion of my business partner. And I was like, what the heck am I going to talk about? And I was interviewing all these women on LinkedIn. And so that journey
Yeah.
of the pandemic and just interviewing women, it's amazing kind of where it's gone since then. So
Yeah,
you
no,
were
yeah.
you were one of my first aha moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, there are a ton of stories out there. So
Yeah.
thank you.
You do a
Thank
great
you.
job with the podcast, Julina. Thanks for all you do.
No, well, thanks for joining me. You're welcome back anytime. And I really, really encourage everyone listening to pre-order, write a review, and share a feedback with us. So thank
Thank you.
you.
And I'm having an expert a month on my podcast. It's called Perfect Prey.
Perfect
And
Prey.
yeah, I'm
Yes.
having an expert a month. And also, I interview children who have been coercively controlled. They are now adults. And so I would love to have you on about financial literacy to support victims, survivors, if you would like to do that. So we can talk about that if you want.
Let's talk about that. And I will also include the link to your podcast on that as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Okay.
Well, good luck, ladies, with the pre-launch and the launch date of October. And I
Hopefully we
really want
see
to
you
come to your
too.
book launch.
Yes, awesome. All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
ladies.